I don't know. I'm quite a niche huge if I am huge.
I
Physically, I'm huge, but
that's
like, yeah,
yeah, niche huge. That's what my girlfriend called me.
yeah.
Um, podcast. Hello and welcome back to the podcast, the weekly show where, well, I don't really have a description, but as I always say, James Cameron once said, it's an earwig into a conversation with me and another guest each week, and that is as good as it needs to be. Thanks to everyone who listened last week with Kyle O'Connor. Kyle Cobbler got great responses, and it's great to see so many people enjoying it. Great to put a smile on people's face during quarantine. Isn't that right? Okay, complete silence from everyone in the room. But joining me this week is another huge Irish content creator star. Oh my god, I'm absolutely butchering this. Joining me this week is Michael Fry. I'm just going to leave it at that because I fucked that up immensely. Michael,
Hello.
how are things?
I'm great. I don't know if I can be described as huge per se because I exist only online. So, I don't know. I'm quite a niche huge if I am huge.
I,
Physically, I'm huge, but like, yeah,
yeah, niche huge. That's what my girlfriend called me.
yeah,
Tell
yeah.
ya, cheap jokes. No, I don't know. Like, I definitely like the thing about you. Sorry, first before we go, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. I've been a big fan of your content for quite a while now, and
Mhm.
and I reached out, and often when I kind of reach out, I don't know why. It seems to be with the people who I have been following for quite a while. I get this notion that like they're not going to reply. I mean, I've been following these guys for so long, they're not going to reply. But like you were instantaneously, you got back to me, really nice. Like, do you get invited onto like shows before? Because you've been on a few podcasts before.
Yeah, and I actually try to like at the moment I used to just say yes to everything. And I've had some really great podcasts and some of them where you're like, oh, I don't know if that was the best use of my time. So I'm trying to like be careful about what I pick these
Yeah.
days. And yeah, I just had a look at yours. I was like, yeah, do you know what? You know what you're doing,
Oh,
which is
lovely.
nice. And it's not just one of those podcasts where it's two people kind of yammering back and forth and it's kind of all in jokes and it's that kind of stuff. It's actually,
Yeah.
you
Or
do
like there's
research
just
and yeah.
it's just like not because I certainly found when I was starting the podcast was at the start of it, certainly when I started getting guests on, would say back in March, I was kind of panicking there has to be a topic. And then I found that when I actually had a set topic, it just didn't really go well because I was forcing it. Whereas my niche is my big niche is that's awful. My niche is like, being able to just converse with people and having a chat and kind of talk to them and about their story, and I suppose a light-hearted interview, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I liked about it because I heard your one with Tony Cantwell or whatever. So
Mm.
I was just like, yeah, do you know what? Let's give this guy a go, you know?
Nice, nice. Before we progress any further, do you want to explain to the people who are watching this podcast what your what your screen is
I
on
just realized
Zoom?
people are watching this podcast. I thought it was all audio before this. Shit. Yeah. So this is everyone was doing like joke Zoom backgrounds, and lots of ones have been like the Big Brother house or the Love Island chair and stuff like that. And I was looking for a photo that was a bit more niche or whatever, but also this is the only one that worked on my computer for some reason. So yeah, I've got Arlene Foster, I've got Michelle O'Neill, Simon Coveney here, and Big Lou Rodker. And I can't remember when exactly this is from. I think it might be during some crisis talks, but I just thought it'd be funny if I plant myself here being like, yeah, shut up, guys.
The
I've got a
best,
Zoom meeting. You know what
the,
I
the
mean? Like,
best thing is you box Simon Coveney, but the three of them fit perfectly in between you, so it kind of looks like you're like all looking at me. Like it sits
yeah.
quite well.
Yeah, it's as if we've all just taken a break to be like, oh yeah, to say hello to Podge while he's here, you know?
Yeah, you were just into the talks of Copenhagen, like, oh fuck it, we'll take five guys, we'll get a Chinese, we'll hop on call the podge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier on, like I definitely would consider you one of the bigger Irish content creators, and as well as that is like Twitter. It's hard to break, and I've talked about this with like Tony Cantwell and other people who've been on the show. Like you take the likes of TikTok, which in a day you could probably just blow up,
Mm.
because it's just quite easy to, but in terms of like continuous engagement and an actual following and people who enjoy your content after, that's hard to keep up with. Whereas Twitter is, I find it so hard to break. And people only, like, you only start to grow on Twitter if you've really good, like, original content. That's how maybe I'm completely wrong. You've been in the Twitter game quite some time, but the only people I've seen who have like broke the Twitter fear is just people who have original content. Because every time I've told people you were coming on, certainly a much older generation of like people my age of like 25, between 22 and above, have been like, oh yeah, I know Michael Fry. Whereas previously I've had people on who are like, who? But I think like is Twitter a harder kind of sphere to break?
I don't know because I've tried TikTok recently and I am completely puzzled by it. So I would argue the opposite. I would say TikTok is kind of difficult because it has its own niche humor. See, I've been on Twitter since I was probably about 17 on and off, so I understand it to a point, and I've kind of honed my Twitter, if you know what I mean. I think this account only exists maybe 3 years, and that's the time it's taken to kind of really get not big, but like, you know, get attention. Or it's only when I started doing the videos that it actually started rolling. So I think it definitely favors video content. And also, like, I feel like it's very much, I use it in a very social way. So I will use it to talk to others, with people I've been following for like 6 or 7 years, or, you know, that kind of way. So that I've formed relationships on it. It's not just something I put out the content and I don't expect anything back. It's more that I'm opening conversations with people. If they reply to me, I make sure to definitely like what they're saying to me a lot of the time, or I'll try and have a discussion underneath. It's just a great way to meet people who think like you do. And I always view Twitter as like a log of like your best thoughts if you use it correctly. Like I don't really engage in arguments, and I don't engage in beef and all that kind of stuff.
What about politics?
Maybe I did when I was like 19, 20, but like I don't do that now. It's not, you know, I use it as a very positive thing, and I think as a result I get a lot of positivity back.
See, I don't use Twitter that much anymore. I would have like sprouts of it, I guess. You know, I'd use it for a bit and then I kind of get into it, and I use it now so to like for political things, because I'm not very good in politics, but I don't like to be completely out of the know. So I find Twitter is a very nice way of getting like digestible bits from like certain, like, you know, political correspondence or something, like, you know, Sean Defoe or what's his name?
Richard Chambers.
That's the one. That's the one.
Gavin Riley.
Richard Chambers. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, I kind of use Twitter in sprouts, but like my Twitter feed is not so much anymore. I've like yourself, Ryan Carrick, Sean. Trying to think who else
Burke.
comes up. No, yeah, Sean Burke, but I'm trying to think of who else comes up on the feed. But like I have some videos, but my Twitter is mostly like political and like Donald Trump screaming, which is tough. I find it tough to get out of. I find it tough to break that algorithm.
Yeah, I don't really use top tweets or whatever. I always go to latest tweets first, and that gives you kind of a bit more of an organic kind of timeline, and things happen in real time. And, you know, especially if you're live tweeting stuff, it's great to have that open. But I use it because because otherwise you get swallowed up by an algorithm, and that's probably why it's kind of hard to crack for people. I mean, this never used to be a thing where they'd show top tweets first, because all that happens then is bigger accounts just take up all the lion's share of the space.
Yeah.
You know. I'm not sure if I would get to where I am now if that had been in place when I started doing the videos or that kind of thing. In the same way that I'm finding, I don't really post on Facebook, to be honest. It's not a platform I particularly like, but I definitely don't get enough out of Facebook because of just the way the algorithms work. Like, it's not a case of, it's not chronological, and so it's just kind of like algorithmic kind of stuff that you've seen before, and big creators get bigger and smaller creators don't really go anywhere.
Do you think Facebook's dead? I don't know. I kind of feel like Facebook. I never use. Do you go on Facebook anymore? Do you ever actually like go on and like people's posts and tell people you're getting a Chinese or something?
No, I use it for work. So I work for newspapers over here, and I'm a social media manager for 3 kind of major newspapers over here. And that's the only thing I use it for. I don't use it in a personal capacity at all, really. I mean, Instagram has taken over the photo function, and I suppose like when events happened or when we could go to events, I used Facebook.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really happen anymore. So I was using it for events and people's birthdays, and that was probably it before lockdown happened. And now I just find I use it for work, or I go on to Ireland Simpsons fans, and that is it.
That is really good. Yeah. Anytime I go on Facebook, it's just Ireland Simpsons fans memes, and I love them. They're so good.
Yeah.
But let's because I want like, so you're over there working for newspapers at the moment, but like you started making videos about 3 years ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, I got extensive research on this, but you were on a Tourism Ireland graduate program, which my sister actually does at the moment.
Oh, where is she?
She was in, she was not as exotic as you. She was in Dubai in China. Not Coleraine. Coleraine, am I right in saying that's where you were?
That is, yeah, that's where I was. So when I applied to that graduate program, I was convinced I was going to get at least Copenhagen or Vancouver or something like that. And I got the call and she's like, "We got your placement." I was like, "Great." I was so excited. And then she's like, "You're going to Coleraine." I was like,
Where?
"Yay. Where's Coleraine?" Like that kind of way. Had to go home and Google it. But the promise was that if I stayed in Coleraine for a year, I'd get to go to New York. And yeah, it just didn't work out. It was yeah, not all grad programs work out as well as the people promoting the grad program, shall we say.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have a particularly negative view of Tourism Ireland or whatever. It just for me personally didn't work out, you know.
Cool. It went into too much there. But when you were on Coleraine, that's when you started kind of making the videos to like keep yourself busy, wasn't? That's when like Michael Fry came alive.
Yeah, it's I realized I had so much free time and I wasn't doing anything with it. So actually what I was doing is making music for a lot of it.
Oh yeah, you make music as well, don't you?
Just little bits. I'm not like, I think I'm kind of the opposite now where I'm primarily a comedian and I'll use music for comedy effect, comedic effect. But I got some software or whatever and I decided to play with, oh, it'd be funny if I had a radio show. And I was kind of like, well, there's nothing stopping me putting that up on Twitter. You know what I mean? Because I love making jokes and stuff. It doesn't bother me being on camera. I quite enjoy it. So I was like, do you know what? Let's just put these up. And those news talk ones just seem to hit a nerve with people, and particularly with journalists. And that's I think why I'm at the size I am now, is because journalists follow me and share my stuff. And all journalists that I know, they have maybe 1,200 followers. Do you know what I mean? They're at the higher end of your average account. I think it's only 200 followers, your average Twitter account.
Is it?
It's quite low, yeah, because there's lots of small accounts, you know, with no followers and bots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But your average journalist probably has at least over 1,000 for most of them, you know, and that means you're being put out to a larger audience than just regular people. And I think that's kind of why, and I always followed them back and I always engaged with their stuff. So it was kind of like a weird kind of networking strategy as well at the same time.
It's like LinkedIn, but like for comedians.
Just for funny, stupid stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. I forgot the code. Yeah, basically, yeah, Coleraine. I was bored, filled the time with something, and for some reason it just seemed to work. And I was lucky enough that it kind of blew up, you know.
One of the first videos I remember yours? And I was looking back on it when I was like kind of looking back before you came on the podcast as well, was the Derry London Dairy. And I remember, and this is the funny thing when I have some people on the show who I've seen their content for quite some time, but his name was Tony Cantwell. When like looking back at him, I remember these videos being like, I remember first seeing that when it first came out and thinking, oh my God, that's funny. But like, I just didn't realize it was yours. And this was like 2 years ago. And that's funny looking back, be like, oh my God, that was that was him.
Yeah. It's weird because like at the start I was the radio sketches guy, and that was the thing I did. That was the only thing I seemed to do, or the only thing I was confident enough doing because it worked the first time. But since then I've kind of expanded into different things like the Aidan Gillen thing, or like the Irish Mammy recurring character, or like I'm playing with different ideas of what Michael it is, because I don't know, there's infinite Michaels in the Michael cinematic universe as far as I'm concerned. So I could play with different kind of formats or whatever. So so I like the idea that I'm not just known for one thing, if you know what I mean. Even though it's probably easier to sell me as a product, if you know what I mean, if I have a clear.
Was it hard to kind of break that? Was it hard to break from being known as the radio guy to kind of, would say, like threading more characters in there, or like did you know? Like, were you kind of like, oh, this is tough to do, because you're probably getting more engagement from the radio ones at the start and they were the ones that done well, but then when you're kind of like, what way?
Yeah, I think once the radio ones broke, what I was noticing was people go back through my tweets and they would like, whatever text tweets I did, but then they'd find the other videos I was doing. So I was doing like kind of little stupid ones before that, that weren't, they were just random bits of stuff. Like it wasn't, I like none of them are well known, if you know what I mean. But I was noticing that people, I was like, okay, these people like the way I think, and so why I'll just indulge, because the radio thing was just me indulging with stupidest thoughts, and that's just what I did from then on. As in, like, I had this thing of like instinctually, if this makes me laugh, the likelihood is that other people will laugh as well. So it doesn't really matter what it is. It doesn't have to be the radio thing. And I was actually quite resistant to being known as the radio guy. I was actually going to stop after like five of them, and then it just kept going. I was just like, you know what, this is funny. It's adaptable, and so I'm able to do more of them.
Yeah, I suppose the thing with your radio like skits as well, though, you can have like which is subset characters within the idea of the radio skits. So like, you don't just have news talk. You have so many different, like even currently at the moment, you have the Ghouls Gals. Like you have different characters within that kind of radio sphere sketch. So even in that, it's not just known as the one character because you have more kind of threading in. Were you always like this kind of funny when you were in school? You're from Navan, are you?
Yeah, I'm from Navan.
Did you go to Pat's? Was that where you were in school?
I went to Pat's, yeah.
What's the story with people from Pat's of Navan coming out as Irish comedians? Is that like a thing? Is like the Pat's of Navan kind of like the Compton of the Irish comedian world? You either become a comedian or you become a farmer. Just like Compton, you become a drug dealer or you become a rapper. Is that like?
I don't know. It's a bizarre one. I mean, I don't think I had the same experience that Tommy Tiernan had because obviously he's 30 years older than me or whatever. But do you know what I mean? But like, there's talk of like there was a teacher in Pats who seemed to inspire a lot of different people, including Tommy Tiernan and Dylan Moore. I actually didn't have that teacher, and I wasn't funny in school. If I'm very honest with you, I was completely invisible, and it's not the kind of place that suited me really. I think if anything, it probably hindered whatever comedic spark I had because you just could not, because it's a football school, or it was a football school at the time, and obviously Colin Rourke's principal or whatever, there are certain things that are valued over others, way over and above others. And so, the idea that I would even try anything like that, or there was no drama, I don't think there was even a musical like that I was able to join in with, or the choir was just kind of like kids that the teacher had disputes with before and had chopped into the choir as a punishment, like so any kind of artistic stuff or the stuff that I was interested in wasn't really valued. And it's not, I think an all boys environment isn't great. I'm not a huge fan of the concept of it because I think it reinforces stereotypes, and there's only one way to be a boy in that kind of environment, and it didn't suit me. So I don't know. Pat's, I wouldn't say is a huge contributor to my comedy. Navan, though, I think is. I mean, Tommy Tiernan described. I was at Joe when Tommy Tiernan was interviewed for Ireland Unfiltered, which is a podcast we used to do, and he described Navan as a vocally violent place. So Navan it's not a violent place particularly, but it's just the humor in Navan is just not really reciprocal at all. So it's very much like we slag the shite out of each other. And it's not like, it doesn't even matter if the other person is laughing or not. If you've had your fun, that's all that matters. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So that's what Navan is. And everyone, like, it just the base level of we're not particularly nice to each other. So I think that comes into it, the kind of sneeriness and all that kind of, it does obviously affect my humor and stuff like that in the way that like you always have to be on your guard because someone's going to sneer at you, but also you're able to sneer at other stuff. So I don't know. Yeah,
it's funny because I completely like agree. What's the word when you completely understand what someone's talking about? That's a sentence. I completely understand what you're talking about. Sorry, completely fucked that up. But I completely understand what you're talking about coming from like a rural country. I went to actually Moat, which we have like beef with Pats and Navan because you used to always kick us out of the senior cup football, but like I wouldn't play realistically ever. But like I understand what you mean, and like yours was an all boys school as well, so thankfully there's a little bit more less stereotyping would say in a mixed school because you would have more, like we had a choir, we had a very big musical, but even in that I still felt as someone who like yourself would have preferred to like kind of do more arts or creativity as opposed to playing football, but like pursuing that just brought a lot of abuse on your way, which I think I think the likes of like TikTok and the likes of what you do now and how big social media is, while it can be so dangerous in one sense, that's a completely different topic on its own. I think people like you being able to showcase this like comedic side and getting like the traction and getting entertaining people is and I think this is where I see it through TikTok is people are becoming more acceptant of like content creators and what people do, and being able to kind of maybe veer from a little bit of the stereotype and kind of be more creative in your own way.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think, like, because I'm not a stand-up. I've never tried stand-up. I don't think I would have had the confidence to do that if that was the only route into comedy, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
I think because the internet, it's very like, obviously, yeah, you're right. Like, it is very dangerous in certain bits. You do have to be very, very careful when you're dealing with teenagers and the internet and all that kind of stuff. I think for me, it is that there's the safety of the screen, right? And people talk with trolls like this in that, like, they feel comfortable because they're behind a screen and they're anonymous and all that kind of stuff. It works the other way, in that, like, I am more comfortable being myself online because of the safety of the screen and all that kind of stuff. And doing things to camera doesn't bother me as much as it would doing things live, for that reason. You know what I mean? Even though more people might see what I'm doing. You know, I mean, one of the my biggest hitter, I think, is like 1.2 million views, which is absolutely insane. So, like, you know, I'm reaching a bigger audience, but I'm doing it in a guarded way, and not like, it's not really real. You know what I mean? It's not, you know, I can't, find it hard to kind of conceptualize just how many people do follow me or how many people like what I do. It's just kind of a number on a screen. It's a high score I have to beat, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but it's mad, like 1.2 million. Imagine 1.2 million standing in front of you, all going, haha, that was good. Like, that's
Yeah,
fucking
exactly.
mad.
Or I even kind of think about, like, my school, and there was like 800 pupils in the school, and, like, you know, I'm up at 39.3 thousand right now. So how many multiples of my school, you know, would follow me? And the idea that, like, okay, it is very possible that 800 people wouldn't have enjoyed my content if I'd have released it at school. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of, I think about it like that. It's like the internet is such a good way of finding your people. And I've met some of my best friends on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So it's been so positive for me. But I think I'm lucky in that sense. A lot of people don't have a great time with the internet or whatever. So
That's so funny. Like you said there, you met some of your best friends on Twitter, and like you, I've seen recently in London, you put up a photo with Sean Burke, who's another guy who's kind of like one of the, for me anyways, one of the cornerstone of like people who are putting out funny sketches on Twitter. But before I started making content, whether it be through the podcast or like TikTok videos or something, to say that you met your best friends online, I would have thought that's bizarre. But since I've started doing that, I've met some of really good friends, and not just here in Ireland. And I'm just talking about, like, say, Ryan Clark was here a few times. I've made a few videos with him, but even like abroad in America and people who I've talked to, and like it's weird because it's I don't know, Ireland's such a taboo about doing stuff like that. But then when you actually get into it, you kind of realize that it's nearly easier to find people who are so similar to you when you're doing the same thing that they're doing.
yeah, and that is it. As in Twitter, it is finding people who think like you, who think the same things are funny. And what I've noticed is I actually have quite a large Scottish audience now, which I didn't think was, you know, I always, it's odd because I kind of wonder sometimes, am I being too Irish or is it not accessible enough? And it's not really that. It's kind of more that people just think the same way and they find the same thing funny. And if they did grow up in the same place as you, they'd find it funny. You know, kind of way. Like, we would be friends if we lived in the same place because we like these same things.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, 100%. Where did this, let's say, the fry come from? Where did like the name for Twitter come from?
It's actually, I just randomly, because the phrase "big dirty fry" I've always thought was really funny, because it's kind of like a big dirty fry is like just a really greasy, you know, fry up, right? But it's probably eaten when you're hungover. So the dirty bit describes the fry, but also yourself. And I just love the phrase. So I was like, do you know
I've
what?
never seen someone go into such detail about a big dirt. Like, you said it like you were fucking Seamus Heaney reading a poem with such passion of big dirty fry.
I'm deconstructing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But I checked on Twitter and I was like, that username isn't taken. That'd be really funny if that was my name, if that was someone's name on Twitter. So I took it. And unfortunately, that's the one that stuck. So, you know, that's me stuck as Big Dirty Fry, I guess, forever. So, you know,
Is it?
um,
It's nice. It's in a way though. It's nice to have like with your like professional and then your personal, kind of being able to just kind of separate them. Is it?
yeah. I mean, that's where the grad program comes in, is that, like, Tourism Ireland had quite a strict social media policy. And so I was kind of like, right, I don't want to get in trouble for doing stuff. I mean, it's not as if I'm particularly harsh on the Orange Order or I'm, really political or whatever. It's just that I didn't want to have to explain to my boss what I was doing online. So I was like, you know what? It's the easiest thing for me to do is just have two names.
Yeah.
And I really wish I picked a cooler name than Michael, but it was the one I was using. So do you know what I mean?
Especially like given the like, because you've like done a few skits of like the like when you're talking about Derry, London Derry, that one in particular comes to mind. But like considering the graduate program you were in, Tourism Ireland based in Northern Ireland, and like it would have just been very contradictory. I was actually, I'm on a graduate program myself at the moment with Jameson, and I remember I wanted to put my name as Padraig because my name is Padraig.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be Padraig because I wanted to have, same as yourself, like kind of professional and a personal. And I think it's nice to be able to differentiate them. And then I think in the first day, my manager came up to me and she was like, listen, no one can find your email address. Not one person is looking at Padraig. No one knows your name's actually Padraig. Can we just change it to Pod? And I was like, yeah, it's just the easiest for everyone. Like, cause no one's called me Padraig in, I think, even on Tinder, some people who match me, doesn't happen too often, but when it does, like they're like who I know are like, oh my god, your name's Padraig? ? So you're lucky you were able to do that because I'm not.
Yeah. No, my own surname is actually a bit of a nightmare to spell. So it's just easier. Like Fry is 3 letters, and you know what it is like. And Michael's obviously a common enough name, so it takes away that for me. But I'm glad I did do the separation now because on that same podcast we were talking to Tommy Tiernan, not that I was talking to him, but he was talking to us afterwards, and he was like, I kind of wish I'd used a pseudonym or whatever because you can play with the personality of the person a little bit more. And I always think of like, I'm not a huge fan of him, but like Keith Lemon, for example, is Keith Lemon and he's Lee Francis outside of that. So Michael Fry is one person, and then other person is
it's the same with
I
love how you forgot.
I was gonna say my own name. I was like,
it's the same with I was actually talking about this with my roommate Ryan. It's the same with like Blind Boy. And even at that, I remember listening to Blind Boy. I think it was an interview he done, but he was saying that he'd done his show in Vicar Street. It was sold out, and the next, like it was like the third night in a row, him and his mates went off to get drunk, well, just have a few drinks, and then the next day he was dying. The perfect time for a big dirty Friday, as you would say, and he got sick on the street or in a bin. But because he didn't have his bag on, no one knew who he was. So it was kind of like that, Hannah Montana ability to be yourself and not be judged and just be a normal man of the people. And then, you put on a plastic bag and all of a sudden you're like this. Because it's like his brand as well is this, it's the kind of like people would look for wrongs in it. So something like that, where if he was wearing his plastic bag puking on the street, he'd be like Blind Boy getting sick. Yeah, I'm going to stop with the story, but that point, like it's nice to be able to differentiate them and have your kind of personal brand and your professional brand. I know it's different for you because you don't have like a plastic bag over your head.
Yeah, I mean, the way he talks about it, sometimes I wish I did. Do you know what I mean? He was talking about this guy who won Big Brother, like the first Big Brother, and how he was very famous all of a sudden, and then suddenly he wasn't, but people still knew who he was. And I guess like I'm not at that level of notoriety or whatever where people like I do get recognized, but not loads. And it's always a really nice interaction when I am recognized. But I mean, for him, particularly about the stuff he talks about, the stuff he brings up or whatever, people like there are people out there who absolutely hate him. So I guess there is a benefit to the bag in that sense. I think the bag also kind of helps him be a bit more outrageous and a bit more kind of, in the same way like, drag queens and stuff like that, they're a bit more outrageous probably because they're dressed up and you can get away with more, if you're playing a character. And I think Blind Boy is a character, and then the person outside of Blind Boy isn't quite the same in person.
Which kind of funny because one of the lads were doing an event in their college, he was doing a live podcast in DCU, and one of the lads was like running it, and he walked in the room and Blind Boy, whoever he actually is, was putting on the bag, and then my friend Vito was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, and then he was like, I obviously don't care at all, but it ruins the character for you now that you've seen who I am. And Vito was like, it kind of does now, because he hears the podcast or he sees him and all he immediately thinks of is the time he met him, and it kind of actually takes away from this kind of idea of who you think he is, and who is he under that bag. Do you know that sort of way?
Yeah, because I went to his Vicar Street show, and he sent me a message like an hour beforehand because I met up with someone for a drink. He's like, "Did I pass you in the street?" I was like, "I don't know, man. I don't know what you look like." So he's like, "All right." It's just kind of
Touche. I'd say he was reading this being like, oh fuck yeah, actually. Speaking of characters, when it comes to like your writing and your videos, how improvised are they, and how like much are they like written down, scripted?
I never used to write things down, and it's because I used to not that I used to watch Fair City, but I've seen Fair City, and you can tell not to.
It just sounded. Do you know what? Because it's all improvised there, isn't it? It has to be. No one's
It
writing
is
that.
not. It is not, and that's the reason why. Because I think I like when someone speaks the same accents as you do when they're acting, it's always easier to tell they're acting, and it's always easier to tell that they're saying something that they've read off a script. And what I wanted to avoid was that kind of forced, this sounds like it's written. It has to sound like a real conversation to me. And that's why, when I do something, I might do loads of takes, but I'll rarely write stuff down. I might have like maybe one or two lines I want to get in, but I try and avoid that as much as possible because it has to sound like a real person.
Yeah. Because yours sounds it does sound natural. Even like it's not so much your voice. I think it's and with stuff like that, I think it's often the like body, the kind of the what about the facial expressions. That's the word I was looking for. Do you know, like you can kind of notice when it's off the cuff, or it's kind of like it's set. This is what has to be done.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like for the first few for the radio thing, you don't really move your face that much. And so it's kind of like, okay, I have to react a little bit because this will be boring for whoever's watching it. But like, I feel like sometimes to do impressions, you have to do the body and you have to do the face. And do you know what I mean? Especially for the Catherine one, I have to have the hand on my hip and the phone on my ear. And then Aidan Gillen, it is that kind of mouth curl where he goes up like that. And it's the kind of Joker smile that he does. That's how I do his voice.
Has he ever reached out to you, or has he ever said anything, or has he ever like,
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? Would that not be something you'd know if someone reached out to you?
No, he hasn't reached out to me, right? But I don't know whether he's seen them or not.
Right.
I did meet a guy at a festival who said that he's definitely seen them, and because he went to college with his son or something. But I don't know how reliable that is. He doesn't have social media, and so what happens is that I have filled the void where he's supposed to have social media. So if you look up for Aidan Gillen on Twitter or whatever, you find me and not Aidan Gillen, which is I'd probably ruined his brand that way. But I don't know. I don't know how he feels about it. I hope he likes it. But I am also terrified of ever meeting him, just in case he doesn't like it. Do you know what I mean? Because he's genuinely one of my favorite actors. But like,
I've never actually seen him in like an interview, so I don't know what he's like in person. Like, as in, like I couldn't even fathom what he's like in person. So, like, even though people who do interviews can often be completely different. Like, before we got on this call, you were just such a prick, and put on the call, you seem lovely. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, I actually don't know what he's like. So my only perception of Ian Gillan is the 2 episodes of Love Hate I've seen, and Game of Thrones.
Yeah, so I've seen him in a lot of different. I've watched a lot of things that he's been in. So I've seen Peaky Blinders and Queer as Folk.
He's in Peaky Blinders as well.
Game of Thrones. Yeah, he's in loads of stuff. Or the Wire as well, where he's American in the Wire, but he's obviously still Aidan Gillen. But like,
is that show good actually?
The Wire.
Yeah.
Is The Wire good?
Is The Wire good? Yeah.
Yes.
I felt like I was in trouble there. Either I was like, did I say it right? Did I say it wrong?
I thought that like The Wire's like I thought people thought that was like the best TV show ever made. Like, do you know what I mean? So that's why I was like, I thought that was a joke question. Like,
well, thanks a million for joining us. No, like, because I have, funny enough, I don't know why I do this, but I've watched so many YouTube clips of The Wire on YouTube, and I could probably tell you some of the characters, but I've never actually seen the show. I don't know. It's one of those things where you go down a rabbit hole of watching. I watch movie clips when I'm just really hungover, and I go down. Like, I start off with the ones that I love, like films that I love, and then I just sort of go down a rabbit hole. But I've seen loads of clips from The Wire, but I've never actually watched The Wire, and we've studied it. I don't know why I'm explaining myself to why I have. I don't know why I'm trying to make myself seem better. Right. So you mentioned actually earlier on, do you get recognised much in? Now that you've moved to, I know you said you don't get recognised that often, but has it dwindled now? Why did you move to London? Actually, can I ask?
Why? I just the housing situation. If I'm honest, I was tired of constantly moving over and back from my parents' house to Dublin. paying loads of money to get very little. And Dublin's quite small as well. So once the job at Joe was kind of winding up or whatever, I was kind of like, do you know what? I don't really know where else I'd work. So London just seemed like the next option, and it made more sense actually for me to move to London than it did to like Cork or Galway or whatever, because there's more people I could connect with over here, and there's more opportunities, and it's all that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess I've always wanted to come here, just because I watched loads of English TV when I grew up, or when I was growing up or whatever. So it's always been like, oh yeah, I'll move to London, new life in the city, that kind of way. But yeah, I didn't want to stay just in Ireland my whole life, because you need to go away to just appreciate what you had. You need to go away and live somewhere else. I just think that's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Would you ever actually? That's because I caught my mom in like a touche moment where she was like, I wanted to move abroad, even though I haven't, but I want to move abroad. And she was like, well, there's no point moving now. And she was telling me all these experiences. And my response was, I can't live through your life. I got to make my own experiences. And then she was like, you do. So
it's a very coming of age film.
That's exactly
moment, you know?
And I've been in Dublin for the last 4 years. So not much came of it. But when did you move over?
January this year. So I mean, 6 weeks before everything.
Beautiful timing.
The look I had there, but it wasn't so bad. I mean, there's other people who've moved here literally during the pandemic, or like just beforehand, or the room I'm in now, actually, not the
I was going to say.
I mean, Michelle moved to London. No.
Really spacious. I can have activities. Like this table turns into a bed. It is incredible.
No, but my room in London, I took it off this guy who was going to move to Barcelona. Do the same thing as I did. No job, nothing set up really. That's an okay thing to do when it's not a global pandemic. But I mean, he moved out of his room. He was supposed to fly like the week of basically the shutdown here. And yeah, just couldn't do it. So he's still in London, but he quit his job and left his apartment. So he's like, no job, nowhere to live, had to just move home.
He's somewhere.
So I mean, yeah, he just had to be back to his parents' house. So I've been so lucky in that, like, I've had a job the whole way through this, and I've had somewhere to live. And I didn't make any other major life decisions during this pandemic. So
yeah, it's very like I'm in marketing, and I suppose like you're a social media manager, which thankfully is one of the industries, if anything, kind of got more work, or more busy during the pandemic, because everything was moved online. So look, I'm same as yourself, counting my lucky stars in the sense of still having a job, and thankfully. And I don't know how much difference this will make, but like, listen, we all know the housing crisis in Dublin is absolutely atrocious. But like the house I got was clearly advertised towards a family, because there was like cots in, unless they thought I was going to sleep in one of the cots, but there was cots all over the like advertisement. But like it was up for a few months before we got it, because obviously families aren't moving. So I'd like to think that one of the good things out of the pandemic is it's showing that like people can easily work remotely, easily anywhere in Ireland. So people don't need to be in the city, and Dublin doesn't need to be full of hotels, and stop destroying the culture of the city and making things so expensive for people who just don't have the money to live there.
Yeah. I mean, especially for somewhere like Navan, if you know what I mean. It was a commuter town or whatever. And what we're finding, like, there's kind of like
or whatever. It was or whatever. It's just
it was a commuter town. Like, that's where people, they slept in Navan, and they worked in Dublin, and that was it. But what we're finding now, I think it's probably exacerbated during the pandemic, because Dublin is so expensive. People moved out to Navan, and then suddenly there's like nicer bars, because there's more young people and there's more people with money and all that kind of stuff. It just kind of improves the place. And like, that's what should be happening. We should be able to work from Cork or from Leitrim or Roscommon or whatever, so that those places are able to grow and kind of develop, instead of everything just being in Dublin.
It's so Dublin's so small as well. Like, look, in one sense, it's so nice that it's small in a way, but then like it's just because you're never too far away from things. Like London is a fucking massive city, but like Dublin's quite small. But then like, yeah, it'd be nice to be able to move things out, and like Dublin not have to be the centre of everything that's going on in Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, we've so many universities just in Dublin. I think we've like seven or something, like seven like big education institutions or whatever.
We've DCU, UCD, Trinity, TU Dublin, which is now TU, DIT, IT Blanche, IT Tala, And then Griffith, which is a private. Like there's just so many.
Yeah, DBS, IADT, like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many of those things there. There's no reason why they're in Dublin,
No.
really, unless you're working in a really specific industry. But I mean, there's no reason why there can't be a university in Roscommon or a university in Navan or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not.
Like, there shouldn't be. It's funny to think about right now. A university,
Yeah.
the University
Yeah.
of Roscommon.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah. How do you get universities have to start somewhere,
Yeah,
so but like, yeah, there's no reason for all that stuff to be in Dublin. I mean, and I've talked about this before on I used to do a panel show with Mario Rosenstock, and there's a few other places where I've spoken about the housing
You've spoken on
crisis.
a podcast as well, didn't you, about the housing crisis? Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the responses are always like, oh, well, why don't you look for a job in Meath? It's like, oh, great, where am I going to work? Like, I can't do memes for the Meath Chronicle. You know what I mean? even if that was a job, there'd probably be like 7 applicants already. Like, do you know what I mean? It's not like there aren't the jobs in those places. That's why we all moved to the city. Like,
And how you find living in London? Like, what's the buzz like over there? You're back in the second lockdown, aren't you?
Kind of, yeah. So we're not allowed to meet anybody who doesn't live with us unless we meet them outside. So that's kind of where we're at. But like things at bars and coffee shops and all that kind of stuff, that's all still open, provided you go with people you live with or you go on your own or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of, I feel like they're taking it a bit more seriously than they did, because when I left London in March, just as the shutdown came into effect here. And people were not paying attention to the physical distancing, the mask wearing rule, all that kind of stuff. Just wasn't a thing because the messaging hadn't been as clear as it had been in Ireland. And when I got home, it was such a shock to see how serious everything was, and just how lax everything had been in London. But like, people are just a bit more, they're aware of it now. It's on the news all the time, that kind of way. Like, so it's a lot more comfortable here now than it was.
Yeah, London's probably one of my favorite cities, but it is actually very expensive. That's the only thing. But it's such a wonderful city. Michael, before we finish up, I always ask everyone who comes on, where would you like to see yourself in? So I always kind of take our guests, their starting point, how long ago that was, and then double it. So like, you started making videos, would say maybe 3 years ago with Big Dirty Fry. On Twitter, where would you like to see yourself in 3 years' time? Like, you mentioned you've never done stand-up, but would that be something you think you'd be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I came to London. I mean, obviously, there's no comedy happening right now, so I moved at the wrong time. But I mean, yeah, it's something I'd like to try. I don't know if I'd be particularly good at it, but I'd like to try live comedy in some shape or form. Maybe not stand-up, maybe something similar to what Tony Cantwell does with his, his different audio clips and these different characters, and people come on stage or whatever, or Hannah Mamalis to be, even a similar thing to what she does. I'd love to do that, but not necessarily a stand-up character, because I rarely appear as myself. So it's kind of hard to see where that would go, but I'd love to try it. I'd like to work in TV. That's in the next 3 years. That's what I'd like to get into, just TV stuff, whether that's acting or whether that's presenting or whether that's, as a writer. That's kind of the general direction I'd like to be in, or maybe just online stuff. I mean, TV. It used to be the be all and end all, but there's loads of great stuff just on, say, Netflix or iPlayer or whatever. So,
Yeah, it's funny because even like Tony was saying here last week that, I was saying, Tony, it's there used to be kind of one route to get down to like the entertainment industry, so that you want, but whereas now with the online world, sometimes I just can't think of sentences at all, and I just pause. But because of that, now there's so many different routes you can go down. So there's never really, now there's not a sure set, this is what you have to do. There's so many different ways, and there's so many different people paving new paths down different routes. So like, it's great that you kind of have that ability to try so many different things, and you can still get to where you want to be.
Yeah, and I think that the thing of having, a large follower count or whatever, is that there'll always be people interested, because those numbers mean things to marketeers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I can try on a few different hats. Some things are going to work, some things aren't. But you just kind of keep going and refining until you find something that works for you. So, we'll see where that takes me. I'm not sure where, though.
So where would you direct people to? Say someone on the podcast and thought, this guy's really good. Where would be Twitter first, or where would you?
Yeah, Twitter. I'm trying to grow my Instagram following so I can get the swipe ups and I can do SpawnCon or whatever. But yeah, Twitter. If you want the good stuff, if you want the real stuff, if you want everything, Twitter is where it goes. Instagram is probably good if you want to go through loads of my videos because they're all in the same place.
Mm.
You know, you don't have to scroll through loads of tweets and stupid retweets about PB and stored in the balls or whatever. The actual like Instagram is where all my content sits quite nicely. So probably Instagram first if you're not sure who I am, and then Twitter if you like what you see.
I do. So Instagram's a tease, and then Twitter's like my OnlyFans.
Yeah.
But I tell you what I do enjoy. I love your tweets of the day. I do love your good tweets of the day.
Yeah, I think it's because I'm on it all day and I'm able to just accumulate a collection that other people aren't. And so I'm able to just be like, this is really funny. There's really funny, weird accounts out there that I just think everyone should follow. So, you know what I mean? It's great to share that stuff with people.
And it's great for someone like me who doesn't use Twitter as much at all. And then when I come across these tweets, I'm like, that's actually really funny. Some of them, though, it takes me a while to get and I feel a bit stupid. But then when I do get it, I'm like, then I feel smart.
Yeah, I think my humor is very referential. So unless you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine said like she'd quit Twitter because everyone's giving her abuse or whatever.
Oh.
And she was just like, the tweets of the day are great because it's like Twitter, but there's nobody calling me a bitch. So it's kind of,
Do you get abuse on Twitter? Do you actually ever get much abuse or hate?
I'm a cisgender white man, so no. It just doesn't like that genuinely that is probably exactly why if I was a woman or whatever doing comedy or expressing my views and stuff or whatever, I would get shit all the time. And I've seen that with my female colleagues who do comedy or whatever. It's just people being creepy and trying to have sex with them, and then when they're rejected being really horrible to them. So that doesn't happen to me. So I don't get abuse, but it's kind of for that reason. It's not that like I'm just very much male, pale and stale, you know what I mean? So I'm not a shock to people, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I like that. And would you ever like set up a Patreon or anything like, to kind of start your own?
Yeah, I think monetization is kind of hard. I am using Coffee at the moment, which is it's kind of like busking. So like whenever I put up a video that does well, I put the link underneath and be like, if you want to throw me money for a coffee or whatever, great. It's not asking people for a regular amount or whatever because I don't have a regular output. I don't have a podcast. I don't have like hours and hours of content like Blind Boy has. I can't ask you to, pay the same price as a Netflix or a Disney Plus subscription for my stuff because I don't do enough of it.
Yeah. Well, Michael, look, thank you very much for joining me today. It was great talking to you, and like thanks to the guys behind you as well for keeping quiet but having a smile on their face the entire time.
We're gonna get back to work here, sorting out Northern Ireland.
If you do want to get in touch, as always, podtothepodcast.ie or PodHenry, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Yeah, that's really it. Facebook's dead. Thanks from myself here and Collaborative Studios. I will see you next week. Till then, goodbye.